This video is going to be a part 2 to my why people are not afraid of thugs anymore. And in this one, I'm going to talk about the economic reasons why no one is afraid of a thug anymore. When we look at this thug, these guys who are their sagging pants, their baggy t-shirts, the ones who talk about how they're in gangs and how their gangs run the neighborhood, we look at that, and a lot of people, a lot of Negroes for the most part think these guys are terrorizing the neighborhood, they run the neighborhood. But in actuality, these guys don't even own a Kool-Aid stand. If we look at who owns what in their neighborhood, it's not not these thugs, these gang members, these thugs, these sagging pants clowns own nothing. I mean, they don't even own the apartment they live in. The apartments that a lot of these guys live in are in the name of a woman, and that's the woman that they live in because either they're living with their mother or they're living with a girlfriend. Usually, most of these guys are dependent on some other person and not themselves. This is why, again, no one is afraid of these guys because they have no economic power, they have no political power. Everything they get usually comes from someone else. And to say that they run a neighborhood is laughable because, again, if you're getting all of your needs met, if you're getting taken care of by a woman, how can anybody say that you're running anything? It looks like you're the one being run. All the woman has to do is dial 911 and she can give you another timeout. And on a business perspective, who, well, I mean, I'm going to continue going on and talk about this, relationship that he has with this woman because, you know, you look at it, whose name is the head of the household? Woman's name is the head of the household. So, well, this is why he's not a threat. I mean, one of the reasons why he's not a threat economically. I mean, he doesn't even own, he doesn't have an apartment of his own. It's not in his name. He's literally living with someone else. He's basically, again, like a small child. He's basically a dependent. And that's one of the reasons why nobody is afraid of a thug anymore because basically he's living under a woman, he's being taken care of by a woman, and you can't really take a guy seriously because he doesn't own anything of his own, he doesn't control anything of his own, and I mean, he doesn't even own the home that he lives in. It's either in the name of his mother, the name of his girlfriend, the name of his sister, the name of his aunt. I mean, he's basically, dependent on a matriarchal order to get his needs met. And that's one of the reasons, economic reasons why nobody is afraid of a thug anymore, and especially women. Women are not afraid of these guys at all because all they have to do is make one call to 911, and this guy's going to be given a timeout in a jail cell for 6 to 8 months before his court date comes up. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of women aren't afraid of this thug economically because again he depends on her for all his needs. The other reason why most other white people are not afraid of the thug is because for all of his boasting and talking about running the neighborhood and controlling the block, he doesn't own a single piece of property in it. When we look at this Negro who calls himself a thug, I mean, we look at the Italian mobsters or the Jewish gangsters or the other gangsters, they own property, they own businesses, they control the infrastructure. But when we look at this Negro thug with his sagging pants and his t-shirt, 3 sizes too big, and his Air Force One or his Air Jordan sneakers, we look at this guy. He doesn't own a single piece of property in his neighborhood. He doesn't even own he doesn't even own the bed that he sleeps in. He owns nothing. He has no property, no businesses. How can you run a neighborhood if you don't even own anything in it? This is the question, you ask many people who are not Negroes, and they'll tell you the answer to that question. You're not running anything. I mean, basically, you're just here. And this is what I read somewhere. One of these Chinese officials said the same thing. He said, I don't have to worry about these Negroes. They're just here. And when you look at this thug Negro, this is why, no one's afraid of him because he's just here. He owns no property, he owns no businesses, he has no, political influence or even economic influence in his neighborhood. Again, most of his money comes from his woman, so nobody needs to take him seriously. Nobody sees him as a threat because, again, he owns nothing, he has no control over nothing, and he really doesn't have a say over anything. Outside of his penchant for violence, nobody needs to really see him as any sort of threat. And even then, when he does violent acts, what do they do? Again, he's given another timeout by law enforcement. And usually, sometimes he's just eliminated from the board altogether. And this is some of the reasons why, nobody takes this guy seriously anymore. I mean, 25 years ago, people thought of this guy as some sort of menace and some sort of terror. But when you look at him in actuality, people now see him now as a pathetic child. I mean, especially in the aftermath of your Trayvon Martin and your Michael Brown. I would actually honestly say that George Zimmerman pretty much was the turning point in showing us how obsolete thug culture truly is in the black community. I mean, in the aftermath of that verdict, it pretty much showed us, people are not afraid of thugs anymore, and they don't really care about them. Like one many years ago, people were terrified of these guys. They thought that they were some sort of menace to society. They were some sort of danger. But today, people look at them as overgrown children that no one needs to take seriously. I mean, even his own woman looks at him and says, "Look, I don't even need to take this guy seriously anymore. I don't see him as a man. I don't see him as anyone I need, to see as some sort of dangerous menace that I have to be afraid of." When they look at this guy, they just see a clown and they see a joker. He's almost like a small, child that people have to take care of. And I look at him, from the economic reasons, and again, he owns no businesses, he owns no property, but he's supposedly running the neighborhood. Explain that logic to me. You own nothing, yet you want to say you have control over things. And the same thing, with let me think about it. Businesses. He has no businesses in the area, and I don't care what anybody says. Selling dope is not a business. It has no political influence. I mean, he's not like your mafia guy who, at least he owned businesses and he had political influence. He controlled unions and judges and lawyers. We look at this guy. He's just here, and you know nobody takes him seriously. And a lot of these guys, when you look at the modern day version of this thug, most of them, how can you take a guy seriously if all of his hobbies include making thirsty comments on Facebook on another woman's internet, watching YouTube videos like this one over her internet, getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning to go stand outside of a foreign-owned store to beg for change, or a red and white chicken place to beg for change. I mean, this guy, nobody sees him as a danger to anyone anymore. He has no terror. What is the terror in a man standing outside of a red and white chicken place or a foreign-owned store begging for change? What is so dangerous about that? This is why nobody sees this guy as a threat anymore. I mean, why would I be threatened by a guy who literally has to stand outside of somebody else's business panhandling for change? Basically, he has evolved from a thug to a bum. And when we look at this guy, this is what he is. I mean, if you have to beg for change, and this guy isn't begging for change because he's poor. I'm going to tell you why he's begging for change. He's begging for change because, again, he never learned any life skills. He never learned any social skills. He doesn't know how to navigate the world. This is why he is dependent on women like a mommy. I mean, when he looks at women, he does not see an equal partner. He's looking for another mommy to take care of him. And again, this is another reason why, many women don't take this guy seriously. And this is why people don't see him as a threat, because if he has to have a mommy take care of him, shows, how pretty much weak this guy is. And a lot of these guys are pretty much weak. When we look at the state of black men, they're at the weakest condition. I'd say that even slaves were less weaker than these guys. These guys have no discipline, they have no resolve, they have no self-control, and no one has to worry about them. They're no threat to anyone. They aren't, some bad boy that people have to worry about. And most people in the business world look at this guy, again, not a business owner, not a property owner. He's just basically a consumer. And outside of, that's the only thing that people see him as, is basically as a consumer. All he does, you know, is he'll go out and buy his Air Jordan sneakers, um, his T-shirts, his jeans, his Nike Air Force Ones, or he'll go buy his 40 ounces, his chicken thing, and he's just living. He spends more with everybody else. Everybody just sees him as a consumer. Um, and you look at this guy, and that's all he does. He's a consumer. He's basically like a small child. And this is why nobody sees him as a threat. It's like, he's no threat to me. He can't compete with me. He's no competition to any white man or any non-black man or even a black woman. He's not even a threat to any other, even other women of other races. He's no threat to anyone. I mean, he's not a competitor. He's just there. And, he's just like a small child, and everybody has to feel. And he literally lives for the pity, and the people they really look at this guy and they pity him, because it's like looking at a handicapped child. Because you're looking at this man, this boy who he's grown old, but he's never grown up. he's still, acting like a adolescent. It's like he's stuck in a state of arrested development. I even dare to say he's like a retarded child. I mean, this guy has not grown up. This is why nobody takes him, sees him as some sort of danger anymore. I mean, they pretty much, everybody looks at this thug, and any man who adopts this thug mindset, they look at him with pity. They look at him as somebody they need to feel sorry for. They look at him, as less than a man. But according to these guys, who are still caught up in their own head, they see themselves as bad boys, tough guys, and even men. But they're not men. They're basically, again, like handicapped children. And, everybody, and the whole thing is that it gets grating to deal with this guy after a while because, you know, the only way he is a threat is like he is more of a danger to himself than he is to others. And he thinks he's a danger to others, but he's really a danger to himself because, when he participates in his dysfunctional behaviors, there's a chance that he may harm others, you know, because he's trying to deal with adult items like guns and weapons or adult concepts, and he can't handle them, on an adult level. He's dealing with them still from the mental, you know, perception of a small child. But that's another reason why people don't see him as anybody to take seriously. Um, and he's not seen as a threat. And I also look at the other economic reasons why nobody sees him as a threat. It's just the way he spends his money. I mean, 98% of this thug dollar pretty much is not going into black hands, but in the non-black hands. I mean, if we look at the way your thug spends money, nobody really needs to see him as a serious threat because the way he spends his money is laughable. I mean, everything he buys, makes all the same people who he's supposed to be so being a terror and a menace to money. I mean, Nike Corporation makes a good chunk of money off of this thug. Colt 45 malt liquor people make a good chunk of money off of this thug. Fast food restaurants make a big chunk of money off of this thug. Um, the jeans companies make a chunk of money off of this thug. Especially the jewelers and other people, they make money off of this thug selling him stuff. The rims and tires. This guy pretty much is a cash cow for every non-black business that comes to a community. Every Korean, every Arab, every Hispanic person, every white person just sits there and they look at this guy with his sagging pants and his T-shirt, two sizes too big, and they just see dollar signs because they know that in spite of all his arguing and complaining and all of his other silliness, at the end of the day, they're going to have enough money coming from this fool and his girlfriend, to pretty much pay for their kids going to private schools, pretty much have money to pay for their kids' college tuition, and pretty much have enough money to live in a nice home out in the suburbs. This guy pretty much finances his own poverty and unemployment with each passing day. All he has to do is just get up in the morning at 6 a.m. and stand outside of this foreign-owned store. And even though he begs for change, the guy knows that 95% of that money is pretty much coming right back to him when this guy comes in to either buy a 40 ounce, a blunt wrap, or a Little Debbie snack cake. That's pretty much how he's going to make his money off of this guy. All these guys at all these stores that he supposedly goes to, change the sneaker store every 3 months, he spends $200 like clockwork, or he'll stand outside there, waiting for the new Jordans to come. So these guys know that it's pretty much easy money when it comes down to this guy. Again, this is why they don't take him seriously. This is why they don't see him as a threat. I mean, this guy pretty much finances all these people's middle class and upper middle class lifestyles. This is how these people make a bunch of money off of this guy. And the only person who has, I'll even go on. Let me get myself clear here, because there's another point I want to make about these gangster rappers who were, instrumental in this, because they are also making money off of this Negro. But first, I'll talk about the legal system. The other people who make money off of this thug, and this is why nobody else takes him seriously, is the legal system. I mean, every time this guy just walks down the street and gets into some trouble, again, legal system, a bunch of lawyers, pro bono lawyers, they do get paid through the court system due to legal aid, prosecutors, criminal justice system. They make a bunch of money off of this guy. And everybody just sees him as a cash cow. Everybody pretty much fleeces this guy, and makes a bunch of money off him. White people make money off him. Non-black people make money off him. Foreigners make money off of him. I mean, this guy is the easiest money you'll ever make. He is basically liquid currency to everybody except another black person. and and the whole thing is because he has adopted this dysfunctional lifestyle from these entertainers, and he doesn't even understand, how he's even being exploited because he bought into this culture, or his parents bought into this culture 25 years ago, still thinking that, that this thug culture was some sort of, you know, bad boy, tough guy, all-time terror, and they bought into the lies told to them in this propaganda created by executives in Madison Avenue advertisers and Hollywood movie studios, and believe, this propaganda that came from your NWAs, these Negroes with attitude, your Tupacs, your Biggie Smalls, your Ice Cubes, all these guys. And if you look at all of these guys, these guys are all living in the suburbs. Their kids are going to private schools, and they've made billions of dollars off the backs of all these Negroes who have bought into this culture, and they took it seriously. But the irony is, the people who created this culture don't take it seriously, and they're living among white people, and if they saw you coming into their neighborhood, they would be the first to call the police on you. If you look at the way these guys are living now, it's just hilarious. I mean, you have your Snoop Dogg and your Ice Cube. Both of these guys now live in the suburbs. Your Dr. Dre is now a billionaire from his not only his Beats headphones, but from all the music he has composed. And this guy, if these guys were supposed to be, the irony is they're supposed to be the real brothers, but these guys pretty much prove to the world that they're the biggest Uncle Toms ever to be available. Because, for example, your Dr. Dre, he had made over $1 billion off the misery and suffering of black people, but when it's time for him to donate money, he goes and donates it to a white college. Your Snoop Dogg lives out in the suburbs. His kids go play football at a top high school. Your Ice Cube lives out in the suburbs. His kids go to a top school. Um, Many of these guys who we called gangsters and said were so real, the irony is these guys turned to be big sellouts. But then you have these Negroes out here who are adopting this dysfunctional lifestyle, these dysfunctional ideologies, and still think that this is real. And what's happened is, you know what? These guys are not real. These guys are not street. These guys have pretty much changed and evolved and turned into, this is what makes them sellouts, is that they preach this message of being street, of being real and keeping it real, and being about your neighborhood. But when they got an opportunity, they got out of the neighborhood and they walked away from the black community. This is why I call them Uncle Toms, because you know these guys betrayed every message that they preached in their own music, and then when it was time for them to give back to the very communities that they exploited and pimped, they didn't do that. What they did was they moved on, made their money, and then left the black community with these dysfunctional males who bought into this ideology, and that's what we have now. And a lot of these guys have no idea that this is why they're on a bad road, and this road is pretty much obsolete. I mean, these guys don't even follow their own doctrines anymore. Ice Cubes, your Snoop Dogs, your Tupac and Biggie are dead, but nobody's following this mindset except these Negroes out here. And then they're using the same, thug culture and thug mindset to go and kill other Negroes. And the people who created this mess have moved on, and now they're all part of, middle class white society. They're living in the suburbs. This is all, and they made all their money off the misery of other Negroes. And the sad part is, many of these Negroes out here still believe in this ideology and in these social concepts and these social constructs, not knowing that they're archaic and obsolete and have pretty much run their course. And nobody sees this, thug culture as a threat anymore. I mean, again, I go back to Trayvon Martin, I go back to Michael Brown. I mean, people don't see this guy as a danger anymore. They pretty much, if a guy comes to them, a non-black person, they're pretty much going to kill them. What people need to understand is this is why you need to stop adopting this whole thug culture, because it's not a threat to anyone anymore. It's not a danger to anyone anymore. It's not even trendy anymore because it's archaic. It's an obsolete concept. It's almost like the pimp in the 1970s. Nobody dresses like a pimp anymore. Um, these guys are. No, it's like nobody takes this seriously. They look at these type of men as a joke. I mean, when you look at your thug, and again, he's just like a child, and women have to just take care of him. What frustrates them is that this guy never grows up to manhood, and this is why a lot of women are looking at these Negro males and saying, "Look, I want to go find somebody else of another race to deal with because you know what? These guys never grow up. They're still stuck as children. They're still living in an imaginary world where they're playing, you know, with these silly concepts, talking about, I'm running the neighborhood, I'm the boss of the neighborhood, I run stuff. When you own no property, you have no businesses, you have none of the tools, to build a serious community with. You are just some guy sitting up in his mother or his girlfriend's house, playing video games or sitting up making videos, or staring out, or whenever you go outside to the red and white chicken place or the foreign-owned store begging for change. Begging for change, as I have seen, is not a job. It shows you have no life skills and no social skills. And whenever they look at this Negro, whenever they look at him, they don't see anybody anyone needs to take seriously. I mean, it's just like the guy who was one of these Chinese politicians or Chinese executives. He said to himself, I don't have to worry about this Negro. He's just going to be there. Hey, look at this slug. This is just a guy who's just going to be there. If he gets in my way, we'll just call the police and have him taken away, and given a timeout, and then we just go around and just continue to do our business. Because this guy is not going to say anything or do anything to impede anybody's progress. He's just there, and he's the easiest money I will ever make. That's the way they see him. That's the way they see him, and the whole thing is he continues to follow, a dysfunctional ideology from a group of Uncle Toms who have just pretty much moved on and moved past him. I mean, none of these so-called gangster rappers even follow this concept anymore. If you look at your Ice Cubes, you look at your um, Dr. Dre's, you look at your Snoop Dogg's, these guys have pretty much made a fortune on the misery of black people. And they're sitting up, in homes in the suburbs. Their kids are going to private school, and all of that was at the expense of this Negro. And this Negro continues to follow, this poison music and this poison culture, not understanding that it's pretty much run its course, and it's time to take himself into a brand new direction, you know, one that will actually move him forward, because this one is holding him back. This one went out of style, I'd say, about 20, not even 20 years ago. I'd say it went out of style. Yeah, it went out of style 15 years ago. And right now, nobody's afraid of a thug anymore. Nobody sees this guy as a threat. I mean, what's there to take seriously about a guy who pretty much gets most of his income from his mother or his girlfriend, and has to live and rely on this woman to get his needs met? I mean, what's so dangerous about this guy? I mean, you look at this guy, you don't see a man, you just basically see a handicapped child. You don't see anyone you need to take seriously, because, again, he has no businesses in the community, he has no property to own, he has no assets whatsoever. Everything that he does is tied up and related to a woman, and everything that he does, he has to get the permission of a woman to do. So why would anybody look at this thug and say, this guy is a threat? There is no real threat from this guy. He is no direct competition to any white businessman, foreign businessman, or even a woman. He's no threat to anyone. And basically, he lives up under people, and he has nothing, no challenge to anyone. He has no economic challenge. He has no political challenge. Everything he does, you know, shows how weak and submissive and soft he actually is. And when you look at this guy who identifies with this thug and this thug culture, you just, again, shake your head and you feel sorry for him, because this is a man who never learned what manhood is, and he never learned on how to, do business the way men do. Now, that's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.